Your Eminence, dear Reverend Fathers and dear brothers and sisters, I would like to begin by saying how pleased I am and how privileged I feel to be invited to participate at this conference that provides an opportunity for addressing the Christian mandate to engage with the world with the charity of God. An examination of this matter in depth within the framework of a constructive theological dialogue can be greatly helped by this colloquium. I shall try to offer a few remarks related to incarnate theology that cultivates social and political action in a creative way. I think that the subject is important for the following reason. First, the undeniable crisis of the modern cultural paradigm invites the churches to break out their comfort zones. Second, ecclesial philanthropy must be situated within the context of both Trinitarian and Christological theology. And third, by subordinating every social dynamic, the economy today proves to be the exclusive factor and only criterion of social development. So Christian philanthropy has to articulate its differentia specifica beyond utilitarianism. In the minds of some people, the Orthodox are involved in social movements merely to project a facade of contemporariness, while their fundamental society is based on mimicking foreign social patterns. Even those with the best intentions and respect for orthodoxy would find it difficult to answer the question, what is the real contribution the Orthodox Church can make to humanitarianism? They see the Orthodox appeased by a splendid liturgy and steadfastly unwilling to draw its societal and ethical implications. Yet as in so much, such an inference says much about the observer. Much can be gathered by asking what is unique about Orthodox humanitarianism. Humanitarianism is neither a postmodern invention nor a strictly Western phenomenon. An extensive range of social theological documents produced by the Roman Catholic Church in the last 2 centuries should not prevent us from observing a rich nexus of philanthropic welfare systems in Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire. Whereas Orthodoxy does not have a developed and marketed social theory or comprehensive social dossier, the Orthodox Church certainly has a worldview concerning such vital problems, given that social crises are central to the gospel kerygma. Furthermore, patristic texts on topics of social welfare have much to offer modern practical solicitations to them. Early medieval Byzantine philanthropic foundations are very relevant since the problems of the world are at the same time problems of the Church. Moreover, modern bibliography demonstrates that the explanation of why mercy ought to be shown to others is self-evident in a social context formed by Christian values. In an age wherein people exercise their responsibility to help the needy, there are no reasons, theological or otherwise, to prevent the Orthodox from robust participation in public life. Yet it is critical that we understand why we participate. Presently, in the Orthodox Church, philanthropy in its social dimension has become divorced from ecclesiology. The Orthodox somehow feel socially obligated to put forth their philanthropy as a model and example for society, and this is wrong. The Church does not act in this or that way because it is inspired by externals, but because it is an image and a sign of the Holy Trinity. Only if humanitarianism is a consequence of the Trinitarian and incarnational aspect of the Church's body and of its relational nature in the Spirit, then the Orthodox Christians can serve as hands of God during the crisis, for instance. The problem arises when worship and social action are seen as two opposite spheres. In the liturgical perspective, the liturgy is a social event par excellence. The church and the world are not ontologically separated, sacred versus profane. However, by seeing history as the arena for man's struggle with social evil, we should not overlook that the church's main task is the struggle with corruption and death. Also, reference to the kingdom should not undermine its incarnational mission to be involved in history. So in an era in which human persons are exposed to destructive or hurtful practices, the unique responsibility of protecting the sanctity of person is even more urgent. Philanthropy is both a deep theological task and a pressing, persistent social demand. Let's see the divine philanthropy in the context of the Holy Trinity. Human philanthropy cannot be detached from divine philanthropy. This implies that ecclesial philanthropy must occur within Trinitarian theology. Our genuine human task to respond to social issues, what would be called horizontalism, must be inspired and informed by our Trinitarian faith, which is the vertical dimension. Yet the dignity of personhood is grounded not in the abstract divinity, but in the life of the three persons. The persons of the Holy Trinity provide the basis for Orthodox Humanitarianism, foremost through the recognition that Christian philanthropy is linked with Christology, because Christology is inseparable from triadology. Such a link is not merely monistic. Being one of the Trinity, Christ, the Anointed One, is from the Father and in the Holy Spirit. That God makes himself known in the fullness of his being as the Holy Trinity, this tripersonal revelation of God through the doctrine of the Imago Dei has a direct social relevancy. God, who is personal and is not a person confined to his own self, is a mysterious model for the plurality of co-equal and unique human persons, as well as for their consubstantial Adamic unity of nature. Second, the Trinitarian doctrine reveals that communion in the Holy Trinity does not threaten otherness, but generates it. Each person in the Holy Trinity is unique and different. However, uniqueness is not achieved by way of variance of properties, but by way of simple affirming of being who he is within the context of relationship. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are all names indicating relationship and otherness. No person can be other unless he or she is related to another, says Metropolitan of Pergamon, John Zizulis. However, this should not lead us to a sort of social Trinitarianism. The Church can never coincide with society, and this is important. We are not borrowing the concept of philanthropy from sociology in order to apply it to God. That would be anthropomorphic. But rather believe that sociology may, if it wishes, borrow this concept from theology. The patristic triadology teaches us to live as persons rather than as individuals. Persons are beings of relationship and not isolated and independent creatures. This leads to the revelation of personal uniqueness, otherness, and freedom through even social relations. The rich texture of human dignity is social, since the sociality, let's call it that way, of the Trinity is God's mark on all creation. The logic inherent in such an attitude elicited a basic imperative in the ancient church, both in practice and theory. Being a person means to exist in communion, and it also means to exist in a sacrificial way. So only the life-creating Trinity can restore the original foundation of the person, that is, redeem existence. The Holy Trinity exemplification of social commitment leads us to emphatically distinguish a person-centered mentality and an individual-centered mentality. This schematic suggests that inquiry into the value of human personhood should not stop with discussions regarding quality or length of life, experiences of human existence, or other finite standards. The Christian discussion of the dignity of human person or human life should surpass these discussions in order to find its ultimate unquantifiable value in the three persons. So the archetype of philanthropic exercise in early Christianity was an icon of Trinity or an icon of Christ's kenosis. In kenotic and eschatological ecclesiology, one observes that kenosis never reduces philanthropy to mere charitable patronage. Further, the eschata serves as the archetype of philanthropic exercise. In philanthropy, the icon of kenosis and the icon of the eschaton are harmoniously combined. Let us see the incarnational or Christological aspect of philanthropy. Triadologically inspired compassion of man to man reveals the measure and criterion for every humanitarianism. But before examining the connection between human persons and the personal existence of the Holy Trinity as revealed in the economia of Christ, let us clarify the very important notion of economia. This Greek word, in Slavonic domostroi, in its ecclesial usage and semantics originates from St. Paul, when he speaks about the administration of God's grace, economia tis charitos, or the stewardship of the mystery, and is widespread and applied in the Holy Fathers, especially in ecclesiological canonical texts. The divine human economy is the foundation of Christianity, the basis and being of the Church itself. The Church is created and exists through the economia of the incarnation, passion, and the resurrection of Christ for us men and for our salvation. St. Basil the Great wrote about this in his letter to Christians in Tiana, reminding them that we stand more in need of the succor of each of the brethren than one hand does of the other. So only a correct understanding of the economia of God illuminates the genuine nature of love for neighbor. Love for neighbor motivates the sympathetic response of every aspect of human weakness. St. Gregory's Nazianzus eulogization of philoptochia, love of the poor, in his oration 14, eloquently testifies to sympathy, knowing that ptochigar apandes ke theas charitos epideis, all of us are beggars and needy of divine grace. We can much easier show empathy and at some level identify ourselves with the utter mystery of the destitute. So in Oration 14, St. Gregory elaborated the idea that human empathy most makes one resemble God. Thus he offered a Christological anthropology that has, as we will see, social verification. So he insists, let us care of Christ while there is still time. Let us feed Christ, let us clothe Christ, let us gather Christ in, let us show Christ honor through the needy that are today cast down on the ground. The us from whom St. Gregory addresses himself is the Church of Christ. This is the Church which receives everyone, especially sinners, and which looks up to Christ, the meek and humble in heart, as the good Samaritan who pours out oil and wine on human wounds. Therefore, a Christological philanthropia conveys societal concern through gifts of charity, liberation of the slaves, public help, or as a quality opposed to miserableness. By becoming a member of an ecclesial community of relations, which supersedes the exclusiveness of natural, racial, social, gender, and other aspects, man learns to love and to extend his love beyond nature, beyond aesthetics, eros, class, status. That is, he is free from the law of his biological nature. It is precisely in the Church where man learns, acquires the habit to love and to be loved freely and without exclusion. This is a community in which, according to St. Maxim the Confessor, perfect love does not divide the nature of man, but always embracing it, loves all men equally. For our God and Lord Jesus Christ showed his love to us by suffering for all of humanity. By suffering for all humanity, Christ's passion implies that there cannot be love that is not socially oriented. This proportional relationship between philanthropy and salvation leads directly to ecclesiology. In the light of the previous observation, it would be important to evaluate the use of the idea of philanthropy in its ecclesiological context. A point that is overlooked and hardly declared by our contemporaries is that philanthropy in Orthodox culture is not merely an ethical or societal phenomenon. Rather, it is part of the great mysterium of Christ's presence in the world. Therefore, it is hasty and historically unjustified to conclude that the concept of social compassion is absent from Eastern theology. Social compassion in ecclesial life combines the spontaneity of truth and the provision of grace. Thus, ecclesial social activism does not result from social experience, but from a sacramental taste of the life of God. So philanthropy cannot be detached from the Eucharistic mystery. Our Eucharistic worthiness is bound up with neighborly love. So we are forced to expand the notion of liturgy to before and after, speaking not only of liturgy after the liturgy, but also liturgy before the liturgy, as Papa Athanasius suggests. It is exactly this background against which the ecclesial leaders in Byzantium and in medieval Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania and others developed a complex program of actual philanthropic activities in many urban centers. When I was a monk in Herzegovina, our bishop at that time, Abbot Athanasie, taught us that the monastery in which we lived, Tvrdoš monastery, belongs to the tradition of the Nemanjić dynasty, which emphasized hospitality. It always prioritized the reception of guests over personal prayer. And this negates the allegation that the Orthodox care only for prayer and liturgy. And this constructive interconnection between the Eucharist and agape generates a social dynamic able to transfigure social incentives into the Orthodox praxis. According to St. Maximus, true being, that is life, is gained by dying and by loving one's enemies, and thereby not permitting the fragmentation of nature. It is striking how in Jesus' parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the word chasm, chasma, mega, was explicitly applied to describe an existential situation, which is not only a chasm existing between the wealthy and the poor. The rich man in Gospel's parable lived his whole life with a great chasm between him and poor Lazarus. Lazarus was next to him, but a great unbridgeable chasm separated them. By not accommodating the poor in the community, the rich man acted in an anti-Eucharistic way. So the consequences of the Eucharistic social consciousness of the Church are thus far-reaching and should be constantly emphasized. Let me say something about the implications of all these to our ecclesial philanthropy today. If we take a look at the state of the Orthodox Church today, we observe the following. The classic Byzantine approach to the theology of compassion, the sentiment that one is saved through benevolent action toward the desperately needy, has only recently taken root in Orthodox social consciousness. This early Christian and Byzantine instinct of philanthropy should be transmitted today and adopted by contemporary Christians. We are obliged to recognize how the cultural framework shapes the way people help each other today, as Christian in ancient Greco-Roman society did. The ecclesial parish or diocese has an ideal possibility for the fulfillment of personal philanthropic authenticity, centered of the image of Christ poor as altar, that's St. John Chrysostom's expression. Because unless our society adapts a person-centered mentality, which orthodoxy fosters, it will die. Second, the effectively intermingling of the Trinitarian and Christological image of philanthropy leads to social commitment, philanthropia, Philanthropy, etc., brings us closer to discovering a more profound and nuanced appreciation of the persons, divine and human, as we showed already. By doing philanthropy, the Church is not at risk. The risk is when it thinks that philanthropic work exhausts its essence. According to St. Gregory Nazianzen, you will not pose any danger to yourself by doing this. Come to this help, offer him to his help, offer him nourishment, offer her a scrap of clothing, provide medicine, bind up his wounds, ask something about her condition, offer sage advice about endurance, give encouragement via support. Oration 1427. A careful examination of the patristic use of the term philanthropia shows that it was associated with the poor and the sick, but, this is important, it included those who were suffering all types of evil, whether long or short term, in a way which suppressed one's dignity. In society today, technology is often employed to depersonalize and suppress dignity. In his book, The Death of the Neighbor, Luigi Zoya, an Italian psychiatrist, discusses how technology has killed the second Judeo-Christian commandment to love God above everything else and thy neighbor like thyself. Because in this technological mass civilization, we don't care about our neighbors. We don't even know if our neighbor is dying. On the other hand, technology helps us act quickly. The GoFund facilitated the rapid collection of much-needed money for the family of the recently departed Father Matthew Baker by reaching out to a network of persons through social media websites. However, it is not enough for the Christians to unite in the struggle for social issues. We look at salvation not only as response to social welfare, transcending social injustice, hunger, oppression, and other social ills, but as a matter of ontology, as transcendence of corruption and death. Consequently, the Church that serves social utility and the rational regulation of rights and desires, or the relations between work and capital, has nothing to do with theology, as Christos Yanaras says. Orthodox humanitarianism has ecological implications as well, because the chasm between the rich man and Lazarus is of a cosmic significance. But I will skip that part. On the basis of these remarks, we should clarify certain things that I think have caused confusion and led to misunderstandings. On one hand, the Church should do its charitable work and social act, or any ethical or political act, with a warning. If we put into danger the basic, ultimate concerns in order to apply them, then we are engaged in a sociology detached from ecclesiology. On the other hand, caring solely about eschatology while giving the cold shoulder to those in need is not the position of the Church. Will a cold shoulder reach across the chasm? Those in the Church who fight for social justice must appreciate the existential importance of social struggles, so the Church will maintain a prophetic disposition, forever keeping in mind a time of judgment for all our actions. In conclusion, sharing the Eucharistic bread, the antidoron, reveals the energetic renewal of social compassion's joy as it spreads from face to face like candlelight spreading from taper to taper in Pascha's pre-dawn. The proper basis for joyful humanitarianism is the very same basis for our understanding of God, personhood. The proper reason for joy is the very same as the joy of the Christian, the Paschal mystery triumphant. Thank you.